The book screen is not currently using React Query to load in the book information, and it's not loading the list item for this book screen because if it were, then we'd see a notes text area here and the ratings show up here. So let's fix all of that by first loading the book using React Query's useQuery hook. So I'm going to replace this useAsync with useQuery from React Query. And then we'll come down here, and instead of useAsync and all of this stuff here, we're going to load in a book. So I'll call useQuery. My query key will be book, and then the parameter for this key will be book ID. And then my query function will be basically what I was passing into the run function before with useAsync. So I'll just cut that and paste it right here. And then I'm going to get my data from useQuery, and we'll get rid of all of this. Then I'm actually going to refactor this just a little bit. We'll add a then here. That's going to give me my data. We'll say data.book. And so now this data is actually my book. And if that's not defined, then we'll pass it the loading book. And we've basically just redone that logic right there. So we can get rid of that. Great, so let's make sure that's working okay. Cool, it is indeed. So now let's load this list item, because right now we're just setting it to null, and that means we will not be able to show the rating or the time frame for the start to finish of this book or the notes text area. So let's come back up here, and you know what? We've loaded list items in the past. Let's grab that from our status buttons right here. And we'll come back over here, paste that in its place. And remember, the important part here is that the query key is the same and the query function is the same. And with that, let's go ahead and see. Yes, indeed, there are our ratings. This is our reading time frame. And here are our notes. Hello. Oh, but of course, if I refresh, my notes will not be saved. We need to persist that mutation, and we can grab this use mutation from our status buttons as well. And then we'll come down to our notes. And this mutate function can be replaced by this use mutation function. So we're going to call this mutate. And then it looks like we need use mutation and the query cache. And let's make sure that mutate is getting called properly. It is indeed. This is debounced using this debounce function module so that the user can type in, and we'll wait 300 milliseconds after they've stopped typing before we actually call our mutate function. And we call it with the ID and with the notes that the user typed. So let's go ahead and bring in our use mutation and our query cache to complete all of this. And let's try adding some notes. Good book. We'll refresh. And there we go. Good book. So in review, what we did here is we replaced our use async for getting the book with use query for getting that book. This is a new query with a query key of book and book ID. And then our query function calls into the client to get that book with the user's token. When that resolves, we'll take that data book property, and that is what we get back for our data. If that doesn't exist, we'll just default it to our loading book. So we get a loading state for our UI. And then we copied this use query to get a list item for this particular book. We copied that from our status buttons. And then we also copied from our status buttons this mutation right here, so we could update the list item with the user's notes that they type.